Hello students. Let us now understand certain salient features of diarrheogenic E. coli. As you all know, E. coli is a common commensal in the intestine. But the diarrheogenic strains of E. coli belong to a slightly different serotype. Usually, the serotypes of E. coli are detected or are ascribed to the surface antigens which are present on this organism. You all also know that the surface antigen present on the E. coli can be grouped into somatic O antigen, flagellar H antigen, capsular K antigen and fimbrial antigen. The O antigen is important with regard to diarrheogenic E. coli. O antigen is an lipopolysaccharide antigen, and sometimes it does cross react with the O antigens of other species. The early O serotypes are the intestinal commensals, whereas the late O serotypes are the diarrhea producing strains. This O antigen is also responsible for the endotoxic activity, and it is also antiphagocytic and anti-complementary in function. Talking about the toxins, the diarrheogenic E. coli are primarily characterized by the presence of enterotoxins. You have the labile toxin, you have stable toxin and verocytotoxin or Shiga-like toxin. Let us now understand the basic pathogenetic mechanisms of diarrheogenic E. coli. The labile toxin almost resembles that of the cholera toxin. Just like cholera toxin, the labile toxin also has got two peptide fragments. The fragment A is surrounded by the fragment B. The fragment B is also called as the binding fragment. It binds to the GM1 ganglioside receptors which are present in the intestinal epithelium. Once this binding takes place, the fragment A gets internalized and it divides further into A1 and A2 fragments. The fragment A2 helps in binding the fragment A1 and fragment B, whereas the fragment A1 is considered as the active fragment, and this active fragment causes the ADP ribosylation of G proteins. This in turn leads to increased in the activity of adenyl cyclase enzyme, which further leads to the increased concentration of the cyclic adenosine monophosphate or cyclic AMP. If cyclic AMP gets accumulated, then the channels which are allowing the entry of the sodium is blocked, and there is increased outflow of water and electrolytes in the gut lumen, resulting in the diarrhea. So you can see here there is an outflow of water and chlorine and electrolytes, leading to watery diarrhea. The labile toxin is a plasmid coded toxin, and it can be usually detected by the latex agglutination or ELISA techniques. Earlier, conventionally, we usually use ligated rabbit ileal loop test and tissue culture test where labile toxin causes the rounding of Y1 mouse adrenal cells. But presently, the labile toxin is usually detected by the latex agglutination methods. Then we have the stable toxin. Just like labile toxin increases the concentration or accumulation of cyclic AMP, the stable toxin increases the accumulation of cyclic GMP or guanosine monophosphate. There are two types of stable toxins, ST1 and ST2. Like the labile toxin, the stable toxin is also coded by the plasmids. And ST1 is the fragment which is responsible for binding to the guanylate cyclate C, resulting in increased production of cyclic guanosine monophosphate or cGMP, leading to fluid accumulation in the gut lumen, thereby causing watery diarrhea due to the outpouring of the fluid and the electrolytes. The detection methods for stable toxin are also similar to that of the labile toxin. The toxin ST2 causes fluid accumulation in young piglets. However, stable ST2 is usually, the pathogenesis of ST2 is quite unclear. So the next virulence factor is, or the next enterotoxin is the Shiga-like toxin or verocytotoxin. Unlike the labile and the stable toxin, the verocytotoxin or Shiga-like toxin is coded by the bacteriophages. It is called as Shiga-like toxin because it resembles the Shiga toxin in its structure and function. And it is called verocytotoxin because it is cytotoxic to vero cell lines. Now, there are two fragments of verocytotoxin. You have a fragment A and a fragment B. Like labile toxin, fragment B is the binding fragment. So it binds to the GB3 or globotriacyl ceramide receptors present on the intestinal epithelium. Once the binding takes place, it gets internalized, and the fragment A, which is the active fragment, further inhibits the protein synthesis by inhibiting the 20S subunit of the 60S ribosome. This results in apoptosis or the cell death. Labile toxin, stable toxin and verocytotoxins are the three principal virulence factors of diarrheogenic E. coli. Apart from these enterotoxins, hemolysins and cytotoxic necrotizing factor CNF1 and secreted autotransporter toxin SAT are also secreted by the E. coli. However, hemolysins are primarily secreted by the strains causing pyelonephritis, and the cytotoxic necrotizing factor CNF1 and SAT are cytotoxic to bladder and the kidney cells. So, as far as the virulence factors of diarrheogenic E. coli are concerned, primarily they are only the enterotoxins, which are labile toxin, stable toxin, and virocytotoxin or Shiga like toxin. Now there are 6 types of diarrheogenic E. coli. The first type is enteropathogenic E. coli or EPEC in short. One thing about all these 6 types of E. coli is you should understand the structure to which it binds, and you should understand the lesions that this particular type of diarrheogenic E. coli can cause. The enteropathogenic E. coli or EPEC causes outbreaks as in sporadic cases in adults, and it can cause outbreaks especially in the case of infants. Person to person spread is also quite commonly seen in EPEC. So as far as infants are concerned, this strain causes outbreaks, but in adults it is only sporadic in nature. It doesn't elaborate any toxins, but it affects the individual or the host by binding to the intestinal mucosa through a bundle forming pili or BFP. This bundle forming pili forms a cup like projection called pedestal. So once the binding of the bundle forming pili takes place, binding of the EPEC takes place through the bundle forming pili, you have what is called as the attaching and effacing type of lesions. These are the typical lesions coded by chromosome LEE gene. LEE stands for locus for enterocyte effacement. These lesions, which are attaching and effacing lesions, causes disruption of brush border epithelium and watery diarrhea. The second type of diarrheogenic E. coli is enterotoxigenic E. coli. This particular strain of E. coli is the most common cause of traveler's diarrhea. It is usually caused or it is usually associated with the serotypes, O serotypes 6, 8, 15 and 25. This enterotoxigenic E. coli is so called because it elaborates the toxins. Both the labile toxin and the stable toxin are secreted, and as you all know, labile toxin causes the elevation of cyclic or accumulation of cyclic AMP, and stable toxin increases the concentration of cyclic GMP. Both the labile and stable toxin together act to cause accumulation of fluid or outpouring of fluid and electrolytes in the lumen, leading to traveler's diarrhea. Traveler's diarrhea is usually acute in nature, and this particular strain can usually be detected by diagnosing the toxins. The third type of diarrheogenic E. coli is called as enteroinvasive E. coli. Unlike the enterotoxigenic and enteropathogenic E. coli, The enteroinvasive E. coli are usually caused by E. coli serotypes O28, 112, 114, 124, to name a few. The enteroinvasive E. coli is so called because it is invasive in nature. Both enteropathogenic and enterotoxigenic E. coli causes watery diarrhea, but enteroinvasive E. coli causes dysentery, that is diarrhea with mucus and blood. This particular type of E. coli usually resembles the dysentery caused by the bacteria Shigella dysenteriae. The enteroinvasive E. coli becomes invasive because of the presence of an antigen which is called as the virulence marker antigen. This virulence marker antigen is coded by a plasmid, and dysentery is usually accompanied by ulcerations in the bowel. Serini's test is one test which we can employ to detect the enteroinvasive E. coli by inoculating a bacterial suspension into the eyes of the guinea pigs and looking or observing for the conjunctivitis. The next type of E. coli is the enterohemorrhagic E. coli. Enterohemorrhagic E. coli, unlike the other types, it is usually seen more in developed nations than in the developing nations. The other three types of E. coli that I mentioned are seen more in developing regions. There are several serotypes of enterohemorrhagic E. coli, most important of which are O6, 55, 91 and 103. The most common and the most pathogenic serotype of enterohemorrhagic E. coli is something called as O157H7. The infective dose of enterohemorrhagic E. coli is very, very, very low to initiate an infection, and this particular type of E. coli secretes the verocytotoxin or Shiga-like toxin. I repeat, Shiga-like toxin basically inhibits protein synthesis, leading to cell apoptosis. There are two types of toxin, STX1 and 2. The Shiga toxin 1 closely resembles that which is produced by Shigella dysenteriae type 1, whereas Shiga toxin 2 is usually associated with the hemolytic uremic syndrome. This occurs because of the predilection of the enterohemorrhagic E. coli to the endothelial cells, leading to capillary microangiopathy. Capillary microangiopathy further leads to hemorrhagic colitis and hemolytic uremic syndrome. Hemorrhagic colitis causes bloody diarrhea with abdominal pain and leukocytosis, whereas hemorrhagic uremic syndrome affects the small vessels of the kidney and the brain and lead to bloody diarrhea, thrombocytopenia, renal failure and encephalopathy. The enterohemorrhagic E. coli is coded by the bacteriophage. Usually, toxins can be detected in the vero cell lines, and sometimes PCR can also be used to differentiate between the Shiga toxins type 1 and 2. So, what you are seeing here is the effect caused by the toxin on the blood vessels. The next type of diarrheogenic E. coli is called as the enteroaggregative E. coli. Again, it is called aggregative because it aggregates or it adheres to the Hep2 cells, causing a stacked brick fashion type of an arrangement on the gut epithelium, on the Hep2 cells. The intestinal colonization is mediated by the aggregative adhesion fimbriae 1, which is coded by the AGGR gene. The toxin produced by this enteroaggregative E. coli is called as EAST1 toxin. EAST, yeast stands for enteroaggregative heat stable enterotoxin 1. This type of diarrheogenic E. coli causes acute and persistent type of diarrhea. Just like the strain O157H7 of EHEC causes hemolytic uremic syndrome and it is quite fatal. Similarly, a strain of E. coli, enteroaggregative E. coli called O104H4 is very significant in this regard because it has caused major outbreaks in Germany, especially due to the excessive consumption of the lettuce and green leafy vegetables, etc. One peculiar feature of E. coli O104H4 is that this can also produce Shiga-like toxin. The last type of E. coli, diarrheogenic E. coli, is called as diffusely adherent E. coli. Like enteroaggregative E. coli, this type of E. coli is also capable of binding to the Hep2 cells, but unlike in the previous type, this binding takes place in the diffuse pattern. Enteroaggregative, the binding takes place like a stacked brick formation. Here it is diffuse in nature. And this diffuse pattern of aggregation or adhesion is facilitated by the diffuse adherens fimbriae. Usually diffusely adherent E. coli causes diarrhea in children between 2 to 6 years of age. So let us now recapitulate the types of diarrheogenic E. coli. The enteropathogenic E. coli causes attachment and effacing type of lesions by binding through bundle forming pili. The enterotoxigenic E. coli causes watery diarrhea by elaborating the toxins labile toxin and stable toxin by binding with the help of a fimbrial protein called as colonization factor antigens. Both enteropathogenic and enterotoxigenic E. coli causes watery diarrhea. Enteroinvasive and enterohemorrhagic E. coli causes dysentery. Enteroinvasive E. coli is endocytosed with the help of virulence plasmid coded virulence marker antigen, and it manifests as ulcers in the bowel. Whereas enterohemorrhagic E. coli elaborates the Shiga like toxin. A very important serotype O157H7 of EHEC causes hemolytic uremic syndrome. Enteroaggregative E. coli causes acute and persistent diarrhea by binding to the gut epithelial cells in a stacked brick fashion. If the binding is more in diffuse format, it is called diffusely adherent E. coli. With this understanding, let us now proceed to the lab diagnosis of diarrheogenic E. coli. Without mention, stool sample is very important for the diagnosis of E. coli diarrhea. The stool sample should be collected during the acute stage of infection, especially during the first 5 to 7 days of the infection, and the samples must reach the lab within 30 minutes of collection. In case of bacterial gastroenteritis, 2 stool samples may be submitted on 2 different days. Please understand that solid or formed stools are ideally not suited for microbiological investigation, especially in the case of diarrhea. Now, the stool container is approximately 25 ml, and it should be a sterile wide mouth container. This container usually contains a spoon which usually projects from the underside of the cap. Now, the patient should be instructed to pass the stool in a clean dry pan, and should be instructed to at least transfer 5 ml of diarrheal stool onto the spoon, and it is carried into the bottle. Please keep in mind that the stool sample should not be filled to the brim, or the rim of the container should also not be spoiled. The stool sample must be collected unmixed with urine or any other disinfectants. It is also very important to instruct the patient not to use the toilet paper to collect stools, because they are impregnated with barium salts, which are inhibitory to fecal pathogens. Rectal swabs can be taken, but usually they are unsatisfactory. They can be taken only if the rectum is heavily charged or visibly stained with feces. The rectal swab collected by this way should be, when we comment on the rectal swabs, suppose we get a negative culture, you should always make a comment that these are unsatisfactory samples, and these swabs are ideally collected from the rectum if it is heavily charged with the or visibly stained with the feces. The collection is done by passing the sterile swab approximately 1 inch beyond the anal sphincter. Now, once we collect the sample, we do the inoculation of the samples into the culture media. The usual culture media that we prefer are McConkey agar, blood agar. In blood agar, you will find E. coli as greyish non-hemolytic colonies, and in the McConkey agar, you will find them as lactose fermenting colonies. Please keep in mind that in the case of enteroinvasive E. coli, The colonies may also be non-lactose fermenting in nature. Peptone water broth will give a uniform turbidity. If we have to diagnose enterohemorrhagic E. coli, we can use two culture media. One is the sorbitol McConkey agar, where they produce pale colonies because these strains do not ferment sorbitol. And also you can use the rainbow agar, especially for diagnosing O157H7 serotype, where you can find out, where you can isolate them as black colonies. You need not remember majority of the biochemical reactions at the undergraduate level, but if you are a postgraduate, it is very important for you to remember. Now, to put it simply, we can remember it like this. Firstly, we should know the basic characteristic reactions of the family Enterobacteriaceae. So, catalase is positive, oxidase is negative, nitrate is reduced to nitrite. Remember that E. coli is usually a motile organism and they have peritrichate flagella. It is non-motile only in the case of enteroinvasive E. coli. Then, as it belongs to the family Enterobacteriaceae, we need to remember the biochemical reaction in the form of IMVIC tests. Indole is positive, methyl red is positive, Vox-Prosker negative, and citrate is not utilized. Along with that, in conventional microbiology labs, we also employ triple sugar iron agar and urease test. So in this particular diagram, you are actually noting the acid over acid reaction of triple sugar iron agar test without H2S formation and with gas production. The indole test is indicated in this particular test tube, and the citrate utilization test is negative in this particular test tube. So this is in a nutshell, a very simple, just to easy recollection, you can just remember the IMVIC test and the basic test of the family Enterobacteriaceae. I will be taking up antimicrobial susceptibility testing and discussing along with the treatment, because antimicrobial susceptibility testing is very, very important for guiding the therapy. As you all know, the testing method is the Kirby-Bowers disk diffusion testing, and this testing method is performed on Müller-Hinton agar. Please remember that most of the hospital strains are multi-drug resistant strains, and they are resistant to multiple antibiotics belonging to the class of cephalosporins, quinolones and cotrimoxazole. And the usual resistance patterns which are observed is ESBL or extended spectrum beta lactamase, AMC beta cephalosporinase, and carbapenem resistance. So ESBL pattern of resistance, AMC pattern of resistance, and carbapenem resistance is seen. Both ESBL and AMC are enzyme mediated resistance mechanisms where the organism becomes resistant to most of the cephalosporins. However, there is a subtle difference between both ESBL and AMC. If you are treating a patient with an ESBL E. coli, you can give him the beta-lactam inhibitor combination, because these beta-lactamases inhibit the beta-lactam ring, but the beta-lactam inhibitor present along with the beta-lactamase antibiotics or drugs will ensure that the effect is maximum. Examples of BL-BLI combinations are piperacillin tazobactam, ampicillin sulbactam, amoxiclav, ceftazidime avibactam. So all these are BL-BLI combinations which are very effective against extended spectrum beta lactamases. However, a person with an ESBL strain exhibits resistance to all the other generations of cephalosporins with a mild sensitivity to cefepime. If a person is having an AMC strain or is isolated with an AMC strain, then even the beta lactam inhibitor combination will not work. Instead, we can administer cefepime. Okay. So that is the basic difference between ESBL and AMCs. So if you have an ESBL positive patient, you can give BL-BLI combination, and if you have an AMC positive patient, BL-BLIs are contraindicated and cefepime works well. This is about diarrheogenic E. coli, and before I conclude, I must also let you know that the other infections caused by E. coli are UTI, neonatal meningitis, ventilator associated pneumonia, primary and secondary bacterial peritonitis, wound and soft tissue infection, especially in diabetics, ulcers and in cellulitis, osteomyelitis, endovascular infections and bacteremia. Thank you for your patient listening.